So, hello again, and welcome to the Tender Visions virtual information with myself, Ayobami Adebayo. I'm a writer and an editor.
And Emmanuel Duma, I am a writer and a curator.
And together we are the co-founders of Tender Photos. We'll be telling you more about Tender Photos as we go on in this information session. But you can find out more about us on your own time at tenderphotos.com.
Thank you. Tender Visions is a commissioning project by Tender Photos that aims to deepen engagement with visual storytelling on the African continent. And the overall purpose of the project is really to support and showcase as many African photographers and writers as our resources permit. The vision of the project overall is to bring new narratives to local and international audiences in insightful and thought-provoking ways. And I think it's important at this point to also tell you a bit about Tender Photos, which is in a sense the main platform that is organizing Tender Visions. So Tender Photos, as we have said, is a digital platform for photography and visual storytelling, which Ayobami and I co-founded. And our aim from the start has been to contribute to nuanced and layered perceptions of the African continent by publishing narratives and narratives about the people, places, and events that have been pictured in photographs, while also promoting the work of visual storytellers and photographers. So far, since the project was launched in 2022, or since the platform, I beg your pardon, was launched in 2022, we have published a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly newsletter, mainly authored by me. And since then, since we started publishing the newsletter, we have featured the work of over 170 photographers from at least 30 countries. And we've championed the ideas about photography, and ensured that their work is discovered and discoverable by a global photography and even literary community. The newsletter is circulated to over 4,000 subscribers on a weekly basis, and we've also collaborated with writers to produce special issues of the newsletter, drawing from our dynamic and quite extensive digital archive. And the slide you're looking at is a slide that shows you the editorial fellows that we are currently working with, from 3 African countries, and they have been in charge of producing, editing, curating the newsletter. I think until at the end of August. Yeah. And the project, in terms of the editorial fellowship, is aimed at helping writers, curators to explore projects at the intersections of photography, literature, and art criticism. In addition, to just tell you some more about the kinds of projects that we have done, last year we collaborated with Process Projected, to exhibit the work of 5 photographers who had been featured in the newsletter, and their works were displayed on high-resolution QLED monitors at a gallery called What Is Happening Here Gallery in Amsterdam. And this enabled us to broaden, the audience base of the publication. So that's just a bit about the kind of work that we have done so far.
And so now back to Tender Visions. So we assume you are joining us because you are open to apply to this open call opportunity, whether you are a writer or photographer. And I'll just try to run through some of the things that you are going to get out of being a part of Tender Visions. The first thing is commission funding and support. And at this point, I would like to mention that our project is generously supported by the Open Societies Foundations. And for every photographer, they will receive a total sum of £1,000 or its equivalent in their local currency. And for writers, writers will receive £750 or equivalent in local currency. But for writers, we also have a travel fund. So, for instance, if you are selected as a writer and you are paired with a particular photographer and you happen to live in the same country, it will be on a need-based basis, and you'd like to travel to see where they made the work, maybe interact with the community in which they made the work to inform your own writing. There will be a modality for applying for that once you are part of the cohort that is selected. And the second thing, we're going to have a boot camp. And on the date that is designated, every commissioned artist, whether you're a writer or a photographer, will participate in a boot camp that really highlights how the project is going to work from an administrative and logistic standpoint. And then the other thing, component of the boot camp will be the master classes. So we're securing 6 facilitators, 3 photographers, and 3 writers and editors who are going to come in and teach master classes. These are experts in their fields. And if you're part of the cohort, you get to be part of that for free. It's going to be a bit of an intensive, but it's something we believe will be helpful as you go out and make the work you've been commissioned to do, and also subsequently for your own personal projects. The third thing, obviously, is the publication of the work that has been made, the images and the text. And that will start in the last quarter of this year. And the way it's going to work is that a month so this is going to happen over the course of about 12 months. But what is going to happen is that each month will be devoted to a particular photographer's work. And so the first week, say for instance, photographer XY is being featured in November. And in the first week of November, we will share some image with some context about what they've done. And then in the second week, we'll share some more images from the portfolio of work alongside a short story that's been written in conversation with and in response to the work. And then the third week, we would share some more images and an essay about the work. And then the final week would have a conversation that will be shared. So every week, we're going to be putting something out and really actively promoting everything we're putting out so that it reaches the widest audience possible. And like we said, we achieve this aim that we have of bringing new narratives to both the local audiences where the work is created and an international audience to look at the continent in a fresh and thought-provoking way. The fourth would be opportunities for professional advancement. So we are having conversations with other arts institutions about possibilities for exhibitions, events, and other forms of promotion. Once people are within the cohort, we will have more detailed conversations with you about that. But we have a number of partnerships that we're exploring, and so some exciting news will come shortly. And now I'd like to discuss some of the key dates and timelines for you to keep in mind if you'd like to apply. So we launched the open call on the 15th of June via the newsletter. This is your first notification to subscribe to the newsletter, because everything we do, that's where the information first goes out. And I think maybe we put it out on Instagram a couple of days after that. So we launched on June 15th and it will be closing on July 15th. The open call will be closing on July 15th. We've already received a significant number of applications, so we do not expect to extend the deadline. So please try to get your work in by 11:59 p.m. West African time on July 15. And after the applications have closed, our team is going to review the applications and come up with a long list. And from that long list, a jury of again 3 people in the literary space and 3 photographers will be selected to determine who is going to be commissioned out of the long list. And once the jury has made their decision, everyone who's applied will be notified of the decisions by August 20. So by the 20th of August, you should know whether the application is going to go forward to being commissioned or not. We just wanted to highlight the tentative dates we're working with for the boot camp at the moment, and that would be August 22 and 23. So, people get notifications by the 20th, quite possibly before then. But we wanted you to sort of earmark that very likely that's when the boot camp and master classes will be happening for those who have been commissioned to do this project. Now, in terms of creation and publication, I've already talked a bit about the publication timeline. We expect that all text and images will be received by mid-October. There might be some individual flexibility with that, but that's the goal. That usually, our hope is that by mid-August, people have been commissioned and can start working. And by mid-October, we will receive, and then we will do, of course, editing and final selection in a phased manner, depending on the publication timeline for each team. So, for instance, some teams, their work might not go live until February of next year, so that, they would have a bit more time in terms of editorials and all that will happen after the work has been made or written.
Thank you, Ayobami. So I'll just speak about the who can apply essentially, and it's pretty much what you've seen on the website. It's open to photographers and writers who are based, well, first of all, photographers based anywhere on the African continent, and since the work will be location specific, we are asking that it's only photographers who are actually based on the African continent that can apply. For the writers, preference will be given to writers who are residing on the continent due to, as you know, historically limited opportunities. Although we also welcome applications from the African diaspora. In terms of age restriction, we don't have any age restriction, but I think it's important to highlight that since we expect the application process to be competitive, we also want that applicants should demonstrate reasonable experience of professional work as an artist, as artists. It's only individuals that can apply. We are not expecting to receive applications from teams or individual or institutional application, I mean. Now, in terms of what to submit, we have a detailed application form, which I wouldn't belabor, I wouldn't go through point by point. But we have, for the photographers, we want you to think about, of course, what you're calling the project, to give us a sort of a description of that project, which team you would like to engage with. And I should just speak very briefly about that. We have 5 teams, 4 main themes and one broader one. Inner lives, in community, the aftermath, faces, and then a general theme. And these are themes that have been explicated to some degree if you click the application form. So I don't want to go over that. But if you feel like those first 4 themes do not apply to your work, you can propose something else, and we will be happy to consider it. We are also asking you to give us a sense of what the project would be, and how it aligns with the chosen team, and also give us a summary of how you intend to produce the work, some kind of timeline, of course, bearing in mind what the timeline that we have shared earlier. In addition to the project, we want to know what community you're engaging with. As we said at the beginning, this is a project that is community oriented. We are thinking very clearly about communities on the African continent, and we want people to do work in their localities. So give us a short summary of your connection to the community you are developing the project in. And we have other things like your track record, so portfolio, bio, and that's it for the photographers. For the writers, it's a bit different. We ask similar things, but since the writers are going to make, in a sense, interpretative work, what we are really keen on is knowing that you have the kind of track record, you have the kind of professional um, life that would make it possible to work with you. And we are asking for your portfolio, resume, what kind of writing you're interested in doing. Are you interested in the creative component of it or in the critical components? What theme or themes you are interested in? So, you can be interested in multiple, just give us a sense of what theme you might be interested in working with, working on, and also why this commission is important at this time in your career. So these are, these questions are fairly straightforward based on what they are. But if you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to us as you prepare your application.
And yeah, once we're done talking, we'll also have an opportunity to take questions.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And so I'll talk a bit about the jury and selection process, and just to give you an insight into the criterias that will be used to evaluate. The first is artistic merit. We are interested in projects and writing that aim to interpret the African continent in complex and nuanced ways. So in short, let us see image and read things that open up conversations about what it means to be African or live on the African continent. And we're looking for the quality, also at the quality of the work, the quality of your images, the strength of your writing is going to be important. The relevance of the project. So it should be relevant to one of our themes and also the general aims of tender visions. So we have 4 themes that we've proposed to you. So we want to see how your work connects with any of the 4 themes. And for the photographers, if you're proposing something that is not part of what we've written on the website for you to um, fit your ideas around, if there's something you really want to work on, we'd like to see how does that fit into what Tender Visions is trying to do. Um, your technical skill, we want to see that you can deliver on time and in a professional manner. So that's why what Emmanuel talked about in relation to your track record, really documenting that in your application is important. Um, so that we have a sense of, oh, you've done this before, the photographs you've made, we can see a certain level of skill and promise that we can be confident in investing in and commissioning. It should also be clear that the project is feasible, um, that it is something that you can do within the resources that we're making available to you. Um, if you want to photograph uh maybe Lagos from Mars, that's going to be an interesting perspective, but we don't necessarily have the budget to do that. So we want to see that what you're doing, what you're proposing can actually be done. And then the impact. We are interested in the possibility of your work shifting conversations and perceptions in practical or conceptual ways. That's pretty open, I know, but we are also quite interested in what kind of impact would this work have, aesthetically, socially, and on different levels. And if in some way you can demonstrate the kind of impact you hope your work would have, that would be very helpful. And now the bootcamp and masterclasses.
Thank you, Aribami. Aribami has spoken a bit about the boot camp and actually quite extensively about the boot camp and the master classes. But I think what would be important to stress would be that the kind of facilitators that we are bringing in are people who are experienced either as photographers, and part of what we are thinking about in relation to the photographers who will be facilitators are sort of a broad range of photographers. So not working in, I mean, we don't want to just have, say, for instance, just documentary photographers, but photographers who are working across board, who are working in portraiture, who are working in, maybe fashion, maybe in the art, in the fine art space. So to just give people, regardless of what kind of style you are working with, to have a facilitator, who can cover those bases, if that makes sense. For the writers as well, it's not simply the craft of the writing, it's also how, you know, for instance, editing, right? You will bring in people who have worked as editors, copy editors, people who have worked in the arts journalism space, people who have worked with more critical or theoretical forms of writing. And so it will be a real mix of writers, photographers, visual storytellers from different vantage points. And the other thing, and finally, to stress in relation to the master classes, is that we're hoping that, by the time this project is launched, we'll have a reasonable amount of photographers and writers within our network who are working on this project. And part of what we are, trying to figure out and also hoping to do by the time we announce is to think through how this can be a small network of photographers and writers working in visual storytelling, in photography, in art criticism, in even fiction on the continent, and how tender photos can be some kind of base and support base for that kind of networking opportunities. So it's not just the networking that can happen, say, with the facilitators or the experts who we are going to bring in, but it's equally the kind of networking that can happen in a horizontal fashion.
Mhm. And so we're going to discuss a bit about the publication. The images and texts will be published on our website primarily. But again, as we said earlier, we are in conversation with different institutions to market and promote this project. And we're going to maximize several opportunities to promote online, virtually, and in person. So we're thinking events, we're talking about events, features, and of course, a big social media push.
Yeah. And I mean, just to give you some tips, for a strong application, Ibami has spoken earlier about what kind of, I mean, what you should keep in mind when you're applying. But just to stress a few things, a clear proposal. And I mean, I hope it's not simplistic to say that you review and you edit your text. So you don't want to send an application in a rush, in the final few hours. You want to send an application as early as possible, but you want to spend some time thinking about the application. So edit your text, carefully select your images. I think we've asked for images, up to 20 images from two bodies of work. So what are the best for you? What are the images that show your style, that can portray the kind of work that you're able to do? Those are the kind of images you want to submit. And then the other thing is originality. Think about what makes your pitch, your proposal stand out. The other thing is alignment with themes and goals. We've spoken earlier, and if you want us to go over any of that, what the themes for Tender Visions this year is. So how does your proposal or your sub application align with one of those themes? And also with our goals. So we are pretty open-ended in the way we interpret things, but we are also in a sense specific about how clearly we want to communicate some of our ideals. And we'll also be thinking about feasibilities, as we said earlier. So you should think about that as well. Since our funding is limited, I mean, hopefully we'll have a lot of money to give at some point, but now our funding is limited. It's capped at £1,000 for photographers, £750 for writers. Um, Also, the timeline is limited, right? So we want to start getting things in. We want to get things in by mid-October. So when you're applying, you want to think about a project that you can pretty much do in your neighborhood, in that sense, that you don't need to travel, plan visas, all of that. Those are not the kinds of projects that we are necessarily interested in at this point. So we want to see a very clear sense of possibility in your application. Yeah.
So, We've been talking for almost 30 minutes. And so at this point, we would like to take questions and contributions. So if you'd like to ask a question, think you should be able to put it in the Q&A.
Yeah, okay.
So we already have a few questions here.
Yes.
And we'll try to walk. Oh, okay. All right. We're going to try to walk through. Okay.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions. Yeah.
To walk through. From Obafemi, thank you. Pardon the early questions, but it seems I cannot respond outside of here. I'm not quite sure what that is. So because it's a webinar format, I think the questions can really only be
Answered live.
answered live, yes. So, but if you have any other question that we have not answered, we're going to share contact details, how you can reach us.
Okay, so there's a technical question really. Would if you have any issues, technical issues with the application, please just write us an email
Directly, so that we can address it.
Yes.
So there's one about yeah, about itemizing the theme you'd like to focus on. Please write us directly to have some more clarity on that. And the second question is, how is the selection committee qualifying a writer's ability? There's an emphasis on published work, yes, but most of your work in acts criticism has been in academic institutions or self-published. Can this count as part of your full portfolio? Absolutely. Of course, there's an emphasis of published work, but your portfolio would also be reviewed. So please, whatever you think is your strongest work, please put that forward. Whether it's in an academic journal or even if it's self-published.
And I think it's also important to highlight, as a result of that question, that we are looking for writers who can either contribute creatively or critically. So if your writing samples tend towards the more creative writing or more critical writing, by all means apply.
We're open to both. Thank you, Lola Martinez from Spain. Thank you telling us you love the concept of the platform and it's refreshing. Yes, subscribe to our newsletter. Please, do you mean 20 images each from 2 bodies of work altogether?
So yes, I mean, essentially you're sending us up to 20 images. So you can work out the ratio between the 2 bodies of work. You can put, 3 from 1 or whatever, so work out the ratio yourself, but we want up to 20 images. And I think you're not actually, we said at least 2 bodies of work. So you can submit up to, from 3 different bodies of work. But hopefully it's not 20 images from 20 different bodies of work. We would like to see how you're able to develop a series in a sense, right? Because the project will require you to develop a standalone body of work.
Okay. This is from the multi-talented people. Can I apply as a photographer and also as a writer? Yes. Yes, you can. If you can do both, yes. Please.
So there's a question here. Could you please speak to how fiction fits into Tender Visions and its collaborative mission, that is text in response to photo? I think I'll let everyone start. Yeah.
So what we're looking for is fiction that can that is inspired by photography, and there's a lot of that, for instance, to work with. So in terms of when you're putting in your application, you don't necessarily have to have written something like that before. We just want to look at the image with your writing. But when you are commissioned, what we're going to ask you to do is look at the images, receive some information about what the writer will be working in, where they will be working, some details, and then imagine characters into that space. Imagine a story into that space. So it's a story that is in conversation with the photos that are being made, and a story that is also a sort of response. So it fills in some of the silent spaces in the photograph. It shows us some of what happened before and maybe what imagines what could have happened after, or even the moment of the photography. But again, all of this will be also covered in depth by the writers we are bringing in the masterclass. At least one of them is someone who has developed fiction that has been deeply inspired by photography. So if you are commissioned, which will be based on the strength of your writing, and then you will have the opportunity to also be mentored in creating that kind of work.
I don't think, I think that answers that perfectly. But I don't think we answered the question about being both a photographer and a writer, did we?
Yes, we said yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
we have that question again. Somebody else
Yeah.
asked, what
Okay.
if you're both a photographer and a writer? If you're both a photographer and a writer, you can apply as a photographer, you can apply as a writer, and if you want to take your chances, you can apply as both.
Yeah. Yeah. You can. Yeah.
But
You
you
can.
will most
Yeah.
likely be commissioned as just one.
Yes. 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 Yeah. You can be commissioned as
We
well.
are not going to commission you to do both. But if you want to increase your chances, like if you're not commissioned as a writer, maybe you'll be commissioned as a photographer. So we are hoping to, is it possible to apply with more than one story idea? Um, in terms of ideas, I think we're asking photographers for that.
Yes.
Uh, I
I,
think, mhm.
yeah. Yeah. And you should just have. I mean, the form only or application portal only allows you to apply for one idea. I mean, I
Mm,
think it's important to give prospective applicants and artists that kind of constraints because we want to work with your best ideas. So
mm,
even if you have more than one idea, think about what we've shared in relation to the criteria
mhm.
and ask yourself those 5 questions. Is this feasible? How does this connect to the theme? What is its artistic merit? And if you can answer those questions for one idea, I think that would be the best one. So give it the best, apply with your best idea.
Okay. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for appreciating this interdisciplinary approach. This is a one-time project. Well, in the initial iteration, we expect from launching the project, we're going to be publishing for 12 months, and we are working on a number of other things. It's quite possible it's something we will do again. But
Yeah,
at
and I
this
should
time,
and I should add that there is of course an extensive archive of an interdisciplinary.
yeah,
Yeah, so take your time to, I think, browse our archive to see really the scope and the scale of what we have
what
done.
we have already done. So this is just an extension of some of what we've done previously. Is it possible to apply if you have project ideas across the different themes? I think Emmanuel already sort of answered that. We would encourage you to, particularly as photographers, to decide on one of the themes that you believe is the most important to you at this time.
And I should just add that we also have what you might call a wild card section. If those any of those 4 themes do not apply for one reason or the other to your work, please feel free to propose a theme and give us an idea of what that theme is, and explain it, talk through how you hope to present it, in your work.
Yes. Um, Thank you, Benson. Is there a possibility to make some changes after submission? I don't think the portal allows that, but if you've submitted already and maybe you then realized, oh, I would like to change something, we're going to share our contact details so you can write directly with your name and details so that we can be in communication with you about that. What we can possibly do is remove that initial application so that you can then submit a fresh application. So please just stay tuned. We're going to share the contact details for that shortly. Is the grant available for Nigeria only or any other? This is open to every African country. It's not just Nigeria. In fact, we are hoping to have people from everywhere, not only Nigeria. Mm-hmm.
There's a question if, as a selected writer who is visibly queer, you want to go to the location of photographers' partners' work and the destination country is unsafe for queer people, would you be able to mitigate for this and provide support that could reassure of
Safety.
safety?
In terms of writers in particular, what we are encouraging, also partly because of our limited resources and the kind of support we know we really are able to provide, such as what you just brought up. We are encouraging we're going to try to pair writers to work locally, when they have to do more essayistic responses to the photographer's work. So we are not, I mean, so for instance, we're taking the call for applications now, and we're going to be making the decisions about pairing writers to photographers. So we are more likely to pair a photographer with, a writer rather, with a photographer who is local to them, so that again, we are, like we've said, our resources are limited and we don't want to put people in situations that are unsafe or where resources do not cover what we've commissioned them to do. So that's part of the things that we're building into the system, so that we do not anticipate that people will have to travel to another country, for instance, to be able to respond to the photographer's work.
Yeah, so in terms of first of all, the project is for new work. And if you're a photographer and you're commissioned to produce new work, there's a question I should have said that earlier. Someone who says they just began their MFA in the US, have more works to do and other projects they have in mind to work with the Ghanaian and African community here. So if this person is asking, as a photographer, we are looking specifically for work that can be made on the African continent and also within a locality or a community that the photographer is sort of part of, whether by residence or, by access, right? So for writers, as we said, even though we prioritize writers who are based on the continent, we are also open to writers based in the African diaspora. So those are the very clear parameters that we are working with for this project.
So, for instance, this particular project is very location based for photographers. So, we are primarily looking for photographers who are able to make work on the continent now. Um, there will be other opportunities in future. I would like to point that will involve African photographers working in the diaspora. So please be on the lookout for that. But in terms of writers, we are a bit more open, because particularly the more imaginative creation, if you want to write a short story, for instance, you don't necessarily have to travel there. But again, even with that, we're prioritizing people who are on the continent right now. Even though we might bring in people from the diaspora, we just wanted to be open and clear about that. Again, we're working on other projects that will launch later that would involve the diaspora more. Cecily.
There's a section in the application form that says link to publications about your work. Is this only open to writers who have been interviewed or profiled? Um, no, really. I mean, the first of all, it's an optional part of the project, part of the application, and we are not going to penalize people who don't have features about their work. I think it's important, as we review applications for us to get a sense of how people's professional life really. And so if there is no link, if you've never been interviewed or profiled, if there's no review, it's fine to leave it. We didn't we actually left it out as an optional question we left it as an optional question for a reason.
And can a writer send both creative and critical samples? Yes, yes. Send us what you think is your best work, whether it's creative, whether it's critical. Yes.
The next one
And
is what okay, can I submit an Instagram page consisting of my phone photography of everyday people, then a link to a yes, you can. I mean, if that's the best representation of your work, by all means. And I mean, again, we're not going to penalize people for something like this. Yeah.
What if I'm a photographer and I have a certain writer that I will want to do my project with and who is also applying? What is the best way to highlight that in that application? That's a good one. You can mention in each other's names. We cannot guarantee because one person might get in and another person might not, but you can mention each other's names in your application. And if you both get in, we will try to make that possible.
The next question is if we can speak about the project summary and the artist statements. I'm just taking a look at that. For the project summary, we are asking that you summarize your project and how it aligns with the chosen theme. So in this kind of, I mean, what we're sort of expecting is give us very broad details of what the project is. So, what kind of, is it a, for instance, if you're going to, if it's a portraiture project, what kind of portraiture project are you going to make? So anything broad about the project, that's why it's a summary, and especially how it aligns with the chosen theme. So if we're going with, for instance, in community, we want you to give us a clear sense of how the kind of images you want to make or the body of work you want to make would connect to that theme. And in relation to the artist statement. The artist statement, I mean, traditionally is a place where you tell us in a very broad sense, um, what's your artistic philosophy, how you think about your work, how you, the kind of work you've done, but not necessarily in the specifics, but just if you're interested in this kind of images or making this kind of images, why are you interested in that? So it's a very broad sense of who you are as an artist, not personally, but professionally,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Um, how will writers be paired with photographers? Can a writer develop a practice that is different from their portfolio? Our writers will be paired with photographers once the photographers and writers are selected. We will do the pairing based on a number of the first, I mean, logistics and the fit that we can see, in between for a team of writers and a particular photographer, how we think that they will be able to respond to the photographer's work and a number of other things. So we will be doing the pairing and then informing the team that will work together. And can a writer develop a practice that is different from their portfolio? By this, I don't quite understand it, but I think, for instance, if you're someone who's maybe your portfolio is only fiction and you'd like to do something more critical, yes, do propose that if you would like to. Would be open to that. But I would just like to point out that the application will probably be stronger if you can demonstrate that you've worked in the particular practice you'd like to do. But really, good writing is good writing, honestly. So you can really do that if that's what you want to do.
So there's a question from Danla Diariola. Will a work documenting a person count towards the images that can be submitted? It's not quite clear to me what you mean, but if by that you mean, a specific individual, that you want to make work on or around, that's fine. I mean, it's we have that's why one of the themes is faces. And there are many ways. I mean, as you know, there's a long tradition of really just working, documenting one individual within their neighborhoods, all of that. So if your focus is on an individual for the project you're proposing, by all means.
The eventual outcome of the commissioned works, yes, they will be published in a phased manner on our platform, and there would be other forms of putting them out in the world in forms of exhibitions, events. So yeah, they will be published.
There's a question from Jean-Yves, who was published. Thank you for your work, by the way. In January for the Tender Photo newsletter, and he's asking if he can submit the same project or whether it has to be a completely new one. Yes, it has to be completely new. The project that was featured in Tender Photo is not, I mean, it's already existing, so it would not suffice for this project. What we are looking for are people that can actually create new images based on the commission, based on this commissioning. Yeah.
Yeah, but to clarify, in your application, you can submit what you was featured on
Yes.
Tender Photo as part of your application. But if you are commissioned, we expect you to make new work. But if you're talking just about your application, you can feature, I mean, you can submit part of what had been featured before. For the writer's application, what are the chances of an individual who has a few publications but is basically emerging in their career? I think the chances are the same. Submit your best work. Submit your best work. We're asking for a publication track record, primarily because we also want to look at more of your work even, actually. So if you've published 7 things, that means we can look at 7 different things or accept 7 different things. So I take your chances. I think the chances will be based on the quality of the writing and the promise that it shows, and whether we think that it will work well with the project.
Can newspaper publications serve as publication? Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, it's because again, we have both creative and critical. We are also hoping that the writing that will be published, say for instance, under the critical component can be, in some cases, journalistic, right? So really just giving us the information about the body of work, the place, all of that. Again, it can. The question, as you can imagine, is what's the quality of the work that has been published in that newspaper?
Could writers join the photography masterclass, and could photographers join the writing masterclass? This is helping us. I think we will design it in a way to make it possible. Obviously, the photography masterclass will be mandatory for every photographer that is selected, and the writing masterclass will be mandatory for every writer that is selected. And so there will be that opportunity. If you're a writer and you're curious, you want to join the photography masterclasses, we'll try to design it in a way that the timelines make that possible for you to do if you are selected.
Another question here is how many photography projects will be selected? For the open call, we are selecting 8 photography projects and 16 writing projects. That's an easy answer.
The form contains links to your publication about your work. Would these be the actual publications themselves or press interviews about them? In this case, I'm thinking about writing. I think what we're looking for here would be writing around your work, not the work itself. You can, give us your work in the portfolio, and if you want to share links as part of that also, you're welcome to. So this would be interviews, reviews, press, if you've had any of that done. One of the reasons why we're asking for this at the entry is also that, as like I said earlier, we really want the work that is created to reach the widest possible audience. So for instance, if you've been profiled in a publication before and we do select you, we would be reaching out to them to say, oh, this writer is working with us on this. You already this about them. What way can we work together? So that's another reason why it's not going to necessarily be, it's not a determining question. It's just used to us logistically to be the quality of the work. So whether you've been reviewed or not is not going to set you back as a writer who's being considered.
On the topic of accessibility, how are you navigating the inequitable exposure to photography and art more generally on the continent? Is this the kind of opportunity that is solely for expats? I'll start with the second question because it's easier. No, it's not solely for expats. There's an, Well, actually, it connects to the earlier question, right? We are trying to be as equitable as possible, which is why we have an open call. And because resources are limited, that's why we are publishing, accepting just 8 photographers and 16, writers, right? If we had all the resources in the world, we would keep it as open, really just open forever. And we are of course thinking very strategically about essentially how to distribute our resources across the continent, as much as that is possible. So in our selection, part of what we are thinking is diversity, right? And how the work represents not just one region of the continent, but also other regions of the continent.
Um, So, sorry, I just want to talk about the inequitable exposure. We have a free newsletter that goes out every week. If you have access to the internet, you can subscribe. Farouk, how can I apply? www.tenderphotos.com. You'll find all the information you need there, and we're going to share that information again at the end of this webinar, but tenderphotos.com. If you go there, you see everything that you need to apply, all the details. Yeah.
Will the masterclass and bootcamp be virtual? Yes, it will be virtual. And yes, it will be virtual.
Okay, Jamil, we're glad we answered your question. How do you define new work? I've just started a project that hasn't been published. Can I apply with them and include the photos produced exclusively for your commission? So in terms of new work, let me just clarify that we are not asking you to make new work for the application. For the application process as photographers, work you've made is totally welcome. And then include the photos produced exclusively for your commissioning. What we would ask you to do is extend the project and make new things. So if you've already made 40 images, we will ask you to extend the project, because part of what we're doing is a collaborative project with the writers. And we're going to asking you some questions about your process that would inform the work they are going to do. So that's what we would be asking. But just to clarify, because I think it's come up a couple of times, if you're a photographer, we are not asking you to make new work to apply. It is after you've been commissioned that we are asking for new work.
I think we've answered some of those questions about documenting the person and whether being published earlier in Tender Photo would, you can submit the same work. There's a question from Tia Lee Brown. I'm wondering, how could the preference to pair writers with photographers locally possibly undermine the chances of writers in different locations? I mean, in the first place, we are, I mean, one of the things we are doing right now is to make our call as, share the information as widely as possible. And that's very key for us, so that writers from all parts of the continent who write in English can apply. We, as we said, we also have a travel fund for writers, so that's I mean, it's not every writer will have it, access that travel fund, but writers who do access the travel fund, if they are living close to where the photographer has made work, they can visit that place. So there are a number of things that we are building into the process that can enable writers who live in different locations go to the place where the work is being made, or at least understand in an extensive manner what the photographer is trying to do. The other thing to note as well is that it's going to be, in a sense, a collaboration between 3 artists, right? When you think about it. So there's the photographer and 2 writers. One writer doesn't have to go to the place, right? They're essentially going to see the images. The other writer, whether or not they go to the place, they have extensive dialogues and conversations with the photographers and can get as much detail as is needed to write a well-informed, contextualizing piece.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is deliver a relatively ambitious project within the resources that we have available to us. And we're thinking through every workaround that will make that opportunity possible for everyone to access. I think we clarify to
Yes.
Dangote. Okay, Tunji does not understand the project. Can we recap? We'll ask you to visit tenderphotos.com so that you can review the material we have there. And again, follow us on our socials. We're doing this now. Over the next few weeks, we'll also be doing like a Q&A on Instagram and putting some FAQs from this, for instance. We gather some questions that we got so that you can um so that you can have a better understanding of the project. I'm sorry, we don't have enough time to do a full recap.
For recap, yeah.
Mm.
Can film and script writers try? I think, I mean, I wouldn't say no, but just know that you wouldn't write film scripts, you know. So
We don't have the
we don't have,
production
yeah,
budget
we don't
for
have the
that.
production budget for that. But if, I mean, I would say that you should pay serious attention to the form in which you want to publish, which is really just prose.
Mm.
So even if you're adding your film script as part of your portfolio, convince us that you can work in prose.
Mm-hmm. How do I apply if I want to work across more than one theme? I assume this is a photographer, Miriam. We will encourage you to decide on one theme, one of the four themes. And if you feel that your ideas cannot fit into that, we have a general theme that we're asking you to propose. So you can articulate what you want to do under that. And I think that also answers the next question. Do the bodies of work have to fit in the themes already provided or can be general? We have four themes and you can decide to fit your ideas into those four themes, or you can propose something to us.
There's a question by an author who just got signed early this year, whose debut novel will be published or launched in October. Congratulations.
Congrats.
You qualify, absolutely. And I don't think we don't have a requirement that it's only, say, published writers that can apply. So you can absolutely apply.
Um, must the project necessarily based on community, or can it be a personal project that resonates on a universal level? What we mean by community based is that we are saying the project must be made somewhere on the African continent. So if you look at the themes, again, when you go to our website, you'll see all the themes. We have inner lives. You can interpret that in several ways. We have faces, we have community, we have aftermath. And then you can also propose something to us. So it can be a personal project that resonates on a universal level. What we're just asking is we want images made on and off the African continent. That's what we mean by community-based. Thank you very much. And we have been on for an hour. Thank you to everyone who has joined tonight. So this next steps and contacts, apply by July 15 if you'd like to be part of this opportunity. And you can apply at tenderphotos.com/apply. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can contact us on projects@tender.photo. That's projects@tender.photo if you want to take that down. You can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, it's tender.photo. And we're going to be putting out a lot of information. And we're inviting you to subscribe to our newsletter, tenderphoto.substack.com. A lot of the opportunities, for instance, the editorial fellowship, the open call for that was announced, was it March? Earlier in the year via the newsletter, February, via the newsletter. Everything goes out first on newsletter. So if you want to know what we're doing, subscribe to the newsletter. And apart from knowing what we are doing, you will engage with so many exciting photographs and photographers from the continent and writers. Currently, our editorial fellows are the ones putting out the newsletter, and they've been doing really interesting and fascinating work. And we invite you to come and enjoy some of that. With that,
Yeah, with that, I think we've come to an end of the webinar. Thank you for your attention. We are looking forward to seeing more of your applications, and we hope to work with you, with some of you, and to continue doing the kind of work that matters for shifting perception about the African continent.
I mean, we hope to work with some of you for Tender Visions and maybe some of you for other things.
Other
in the
projects,
future.
yes, yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And have a good evening or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Thank you.